This initiative began by the I.A.O. when the dialogue on the future of Europe began. So we told the European institutions at the time that not only member states should be involved, they should invite every European country, as well as civil society organizations with Christian values as a priority, churches, interparliamentary associations or organizations such as the Interparliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean or the Black Sea. And we suggested at the time that IPU should also be invited, the Interparliamentary Union. Europe is the center of the world, the lung of the world. We weren't granted this request. The dialogue on the future of Europe started. We read about it on a huge site for consultation purposes, but it didn't work. People only expressed their disagreement or anger, so there was no substantial discussion. Then COVID came, the issue was forgotten, and when the report came out, 300 pages long, we realized that there was no mention whatsoever to Christian values, which we think are the foundation of the European construction. And in our opinion, strangely enough, in absentia of the European Parliament and other institutions, there was an effort to put aside Christian values and anything that has to do with religion. They're probably afraid of something or upset about something. This was the reason why we worked hard in order to draft a text that was signed officially here in the opening ceremony. Now, we have with us Father Manuel, who is based at the heart of Brussels. He is the Secretary of the Secretary General of the Commission of the Bishops' Conference of the European Union. The Catholic Church is much better organized than the Orthodox one. They set up this organization of the Bishops' Conferences from all EU member states. And we have the President with us, a bishop near Rome. We also had the President of the Council of European Churches, who happens to be an Orthodox at present. Now, who are the panelists? Andreas Hast, sitting right next to me. I've met him many years ago. He comes from the Czech Republic. He's Orthodox. Our only Orthodox liaison in the Czech Republic in the field of politics. There's no member of parliament. He's Deputy Minister for Culture. Has a very good picture of the Orthodox situation in the Czech Republic. We have Mr. Bouras, whom I've known long. He's the head of the so-called think tank of the European Parliament. After Prodi, the only text containing a reference to religion, to religions, was written by him, was drafted by his service. And we wondered what was going on there. It was back in 22, the war of Russia in Ukraine, the religious dimension. That was the title. It was made available to members of European Parliament to raise their awareness. And we exchanged letters, and we pointed out to them that there are many more things the European Union forgets or omits. We also have Carlton Deal, an old friend again. For many years, he has been preparing the European Prayer Breakfast. It takes place once a year. And last but not least, Sotiris Gounalas, a very well-known Orthodox intellectual. Sotiris had the great privilege to be one of the co-founders of an excellent journal entitled Synaxis, so together with Mr. Nellas, late Mr. Nellas. He follows developments very closely. You are two journalists, ex-journalists. Now you're working in a different field. So let me hand over to Father Manuel and we can begin.
Yes, good morning to all again. I'm not going to speak very much because I think the important thing is to give the floor to the panelists and they give their statement, give their speech, but I'll just say a few things just to give the framework of this panel, which is table 6, round table 6, on Christian values in the field of international politics. That is what we're going to be discussing today. And in the description of this thematic session, as already was said by Dr. Vitalis, if you see it, some issues are put forward. One of them is, as has been said, the Conference on the Future of Europe. This dialogue on the future of Europe that was initiated by the Commission in 2019 had different phases. One was a multilingual platform where all citizens of Europe could give an opinion, introduce a theme, also do some activity or put forward some initiative. Then there was a consultation of citizens selected randomly and in a representative way. And then at the end there was the actual conference and we had the final outcome, a final report. And it is true, as this was said by Dr. Vitalis, that in this final report, in this outcome, no mention is present of Christian values, of Christianity, of Christian identity, whatever. So that's one of the things that is a bit in the introduction to this thematic session. Another thing that is said in that description of this thematic session is secularization. This is a big concept. It might be seen in different ways. In this description of this session, it is mentioned or described as taking away, excluding religious symbols, religious terms, religious words from official documents. So the attempt or the intention of removing the religious presence in Europe. So this is another thing in the framework of this roundtable we're having. Then it is mentioned very interestingly, and also Dr. Vitalis just mentioned, I.A.O, the Interparliamentary Union. They had a meeting in Bucharest, they published a communique, and there it says that religious factor should be taken into account in shaping national and international politics. So this is a bit the context of this roundtable we're having today. Just a few things on my side, and then I'll leave the floor. Thoughts that I have gathered. I have made a statement yesterday, and I had a speech, so I'm not going to repeat things. But I think some things that have come out are talking, or debates, or discussions. So one of the things, and a question, and this might be a question for discussion later. Why is this so? Why is it that Christian values are not present or were not present in the conference on the European churches, or the future of Europe? Why were not the churches invited to this conference? At the end, we had a kind of presence in the last part. But why? Why is this so? Is it because it is a trend promoted by political authorities and bureaucratic centers? Is this a trend that is promoted by some? Is it a cultural tendency that Christian values are disappearing or not taking into account? Is it because there is a debilitation, there is a fragility of the churches in Europe now? And I think this is also true for the Catholic Church. The presence we had in European society as Catholic Church 20 years ago is not the same we have today. So, this was the first question. Is this not presence of Christian values? What is the reason for this not presence of Christian values in official documents, in official events? Then, a second question. Is this totally bad? That Christian values are not present explicitly and churches are not invited explicitly? Do they have to be invited? In what way? This will be another question I think is worth discussing, it's worth keeping in mind in this roundtable we're having. A third question, how should we face this? How as Christians, Christian churches, Christian politicians, how do we face this phenomenon? Do we have to have an attitude of confrontation? Do we have to have an attitude of dialogue? How do we face this? There are now going to be elections. I think I said yesterday it's important that we work together as churches, as Christians. And an example is this that we're doing today. A fourth point, just to introduce a bit of discussion. There have been great changes in these last years, in these last 15, 20 years in Europe. We have had various crises, the economic crisis, the migration crisis, COVID, and there are changes that are taking place. There's a demographic change that's important. So things that were maybe true some years ago are not true anymore. So we have to take these changes in mind. We have a war in our continent, a terrible war, a war between Christians. So this has to also be taken into account, and a war that we know affects also our ecumenical relations. Migration and asylum, I talked about this yesterday, artificial intelligence, climate change, populism. How would populism be present in the coming election? There's going to be a change in the political panorama in Europe, possibly in the next election. So how are we as Christians going to confront this? And other things I think are important to keep in mind. We heard this morning, there's a narrative of seeing in a bad way the non-Orthodox West. We have to be careful because this is also a narrative that Putin uses. So maybe it's good that we are a bit autocritical in this. Then, the unity of churches, ecumenism. I think this is very important. I worked on this very many years. So I think there's also something. I know that ecumenism sometimes in the Orthodox world is not a nice term. But the unity of churches, I think it's very important, as we see also today. Even when we don't agree on everything. Even if we don't agree with everything. The principle, it was said by Papas today, and I like very much what he said, the principle of separation and neutrality. It's an important principle that we also as Christians have to keep. We also as Christians have to keep. The issue of a European identity was also said this morning. I'm Spanish and then I'm European. Am I European and Spanish at the same time? Is there a European identity? Can it be constructed? And then just an answer, it was said this morning, Article 17. Article 17, this article is on the functioning of the European Union. It's been introduced in the treaty. It obliges the European Union to have a dialogue with churches, with religious associations, with religious communities, with philosophical associations. And it was said, are we happy with this dialogue? I say, we are happy that it exists. We're not very happy how it is implemented. I think much can be done to implement it better. This obviously depends on the persons that are in charge of this dialogue. Normally the first vice president of the parliament and one of the vice presidents of the commission. In this case, Kines, and it was MEP Caras for the parliament in this last mandate. Did they do a good job? I leave that question open. Alzaid is a very great expert on this, so he can tell us a bit more. And then there's just a thing that I think was interesting in the last intervention, also by Reverend Thomas, of including in some way inter-religious aspect in our meetings. We had a presence of the Muslim League, I think, in the first panel, first day. So in some way, maybe we have to open. I think ecumenism is going also in this direction of opening itself not only to a dialogue between churches, between Christians, but also including in some way, and this is difficult, including in some way also the presence of other religions. Okay, I'll leave it there. Just a small introduction to this panel today. And I don't know, Dr. Migdalis, with whom should we begin?
Let me explain. We'll start with the two candidate MEPs. I just need 2 minutes. But I'd like to ask for your permission to give the floor to Vangelis Paras, who works for I.A.O. A very quick briefing about what happened in Marrakesh in I.A.O. Let me point out that the I.A.O. and the IPU, the Interparliamentary Union, have a long tradition of interinstitutional cooperation. This confidence-building relation is reported on the recent parliamentary report on freedom of religion and faith, adopted last summer by IPU. In June 2023, IPU organized a conference on interfaith dialogue for the first time, and global political organization, the oldest one, highlighted the issue of dialogue between political and religious actors. Cooperation between the religious and political space to overcome global challenges is a practice which is expected to reinforce efforts for global peace, to promote participation and peaceful coexistence, to defend the rule of law, and to encourage collective efforts that will lead us to a better society. Let me quote the Marrakesh communique. Our work as parliamentarians can benefit from greater awareness of the influence and importance of religion and belief and of their contribution to the welfare of mankind. We must engage these networks as allies in our common cause for social justice and coexistence. We affirm our commitment to working together for peaceful coexistence, inclusion, and strong institutions in full respect of the rule of law. The communique also includes a series of recommendations to national parliaments, including to ensure that all religions, beliefs, and faith-based organizations are treated equally and without discrimination under the law. Include representatives of religions, beliefs, and faith-based organizations alongside other civil society representatives in all their diversity in ongoing efforts to secure the implementation of national legislation and international commitments and the promotion of social cohesion. Engage with religious and belief leaders and communities to help build solidarity and effectively address the major challenges of our time, such as poverty and inequality, climate change, conflict and war, as well as widespread addiction, overconsumption, and digital technologies, including the negative uses of artificial intelligence. Promote since an early age the principles of integration and respect for diversity, as well as respect for all religions, as the foundation of peaceful societies without any exclusion. You must have noted that many of these appeals by IPU are directly related with the themes of this conference. This demonstrates the need of the change in international relations towards a more inclusive approach, including not just the political arena, but also the ecclesiastical space, the civil society, and the youth. In brief, the IPU initiative appears to take into consideration the religious element in future policy making. Now, Kostas, what's your opinion about that? Thank you very much. First of all, Christos Anesti, Christ has risen. Truly he's risen. This is a great opportunity in which hate is beaten by truth. Let's keep that in mind and focus on inclusion, human communication, peaceful coexistence in a home called European Union. And this is a great achievement, an achievement following 2 world wars with millions of casualties. So let me start by saying that the key issue is how to communicate in frankness, honestly, and allow me to begin on a tone of confession. In October 2019, shortly before, after the European elections, the then President Ursula von der Leyen initiated a new portfolio. You probably remember the College of the Commission, the so-called on the promotion of the European way of life. I voted against. I'd like to explain why. Actually, the commissioner is currently a Greek, Margaritis Kinas, a very honest person. Let me explain why. This portfolio also included the dialogue between the Commission and religious communities. I wondered what the role of this dialogue with religious communities could be in a portfolio which highlights the European way of life as a higher form of expression of civilization. Therefore, its priorities are migration, rule of law, human rights and liberties. Had the portfolio been only about the promotion of European principles and values, I would have voted for it. I'm in a country, I'm proud to be Greek, because we have broadened the Greek way of life in our discussion about what is Greek way of life and what is not. Orthodox, Catholics, Muslims, Jews have lived together in Greece for years. So what defines the path to be taken by the Greek way of life? It's the synthesis that makes us proud and makes us special in European reality. So this was my rationale for voting against the title, not the actual content. In order to justify her choice, von der Leyen was based on Fukuyama, who spoke about the end of history because we have found capitalism as a perfect system, and we may reject every counter-proposal. Ms. von der Leyen probably did not know that Fukuyama later retracted all his statements. In spite of our political differences on the instrumentalization of religion, which is attempted by conservative forces, my experience in the European Parliament for 5 years confirmed my conviction that indeed Christianity and the left share common values, and we can work together, we can converse, we can engage in a discussion, and work together constructively, not just in social items, fight against poverty, for instance, in other issues as well. Frankly speaking, I am not a holder of the absolute truth, nor is my political party. It's part of the scientific dialectics to find ways to synthesize. and political organizations, as you very well know, in Europe clash for two reasons. For the distribution of wealth. It's not that the left wing is good and the right wing is bad. They're both honest, but we have a different approach to economy. And economy often creates inequalities and other issues. So Christianity here, the Christian values, can be a tool of rapprochement for us, so we can find common ground and, of course, common strategic objectives. Although the utopia, not utopia, has been hit hard in the era of late capitalism. There are domains in which we can find common ground: migration and asylum, as the gentleman said earlier, something that I worked on. Transparency, drug dependence treatment, which is a personal field of activity for me. I was at the drug-free center for dependent individuals for 25 years. I was on the board. As a member of the Libre Committee, we're working on migration, refugees. I think the gospel says something like, I was a foreigner and you cared for me. But how is this principle applied in European policies on refugees and migration? One of the first initiatives as an MEP, and I want you to be my allies in this. I conveyed this message to his Beatitude Hieronymus. I want to have the right to find a missing person. That's the ultimate right. Have missing persons and have them identified when we have courses on the island with gravestones writing unknown, unknown. The Red Cross has been around since World War II, and we're looking for missing persons on radio broadcasts. So we can create something like that. I opposed the new covenant on the new covenant on migration. Left wing is for open borders, welcome refugees. That's what other people say in our name. The church might say welcome refugees because that's part of solidarity. Good people may say that. The left wing, political organizations of the left, ought to highlight the reasons behind the migration crisis that need to be changed or resisted to. So our motto is relocation. Speaking for my party and my political group, immediate relocation of the refugees from Ukraine to the Middle East, wars and then climate change in Africa. These are the reasons. So direct relocation across EU member states. Obligatory relocation, if I may put it that way. Unfortunately, although the European Parliament appeared with this position, or legal routes of migration, legal migration pathways, its resolution spoke of voluntary relocation. What does this mean? In a Europe of solidarity, you can pay out solidarity, you can buy it out. Austria may very well say, I do not want to take my share, and since I can afford it, I will pay my share to the member state of reception. That's not part of proportionality or justice. prima facie recognition or family reunification, human rights. People don't want to come here. They're not migrants. They're refugees. To conclude, those in favor of capitalism without reign, honest capitalism, seem to have a vision of another heaven, another paradise, synonymous to the invisible hand of the market, which self-regulates and leads humans to a false heaven, according to Friedman. As in contemporary left parties, the paradise of capitalism is built on the hell of wars, exploitation, precariousness, and that's the neoliberal market economy, which is fully against, in my opinion, the fundamental Christian values and, of course, the values of contemporary left. So what I mean is that there is a genuine popular demand for our values and your values to come together with simply a political instrument in favor of peace, security, and a human vision. We can't just create generations whose main motto is we must withstand that. We must have young people and generations who dream, hope, get education, make families. If we agree that we can engage in a dialogue, we can achieve a lot. I will only disagree with the previous speaker on one point. They're not populists, they're fascists. Let's call a spade a spade. It's fascism and Nazism. After 1935, returning, coming back with its obsessions, knocking on Europe's door to create major problems, particularly among the so-called Luban proletariat. There will be allies, and we will find them against us. So, good people, democratic people, people who want to have Europe as a single home, should come together and ally themselves. Spinelli spoke of rule of law, European defense security policy without the involvement of any other organization, NATO, Russians, Chinese, and of course, a new currency. We can just have Euro unite us. Our principles should unite us. Thank you.